BFFP, sorry about that, including BFFP's annual global brand audit and related initiatives that advance BFFP's corporate campaign objectives and strategies. Sybil will be taking us through the journey of brand audits and their most recently celebrated 5-year milestone achievement. So over to you, Sybil.
Thank you so much, Marissa, and welcome again to everyone just joining in now. Allow me simply to just share my screen with you. And yeah, so as my colleague was saying, we are very excited to be launching and supporting the End Plastic Pollution Uganda team with their brand audit reports coming out today. And we thought it'd be helpful to start with a bit of context and background. So for those of you who may be newer or a bit more unfamiliar with the Break Free from Plastic movement, it's my pleasure to tell you a little bit about our movement and where this brand audit project came from and kind of situate us with a bit of context before diving in to learn more about the Uganda case specifically. So the Break Free from Plastic movement is a global movement. You can see here in the bottom of the slide a photo of some of the founding members who formed the movement about 5 years ago now. In 2017, it was founded in Asia and has since grown into a very global network present in over 50 countries. So since its launch, apologies, 2016, not 2017. Since its launch, we've seen more than 11,000 organizations and individuals join this global movement, working together to build a future free from plastic pollution. So as we've seen this plastic pollution crisis grow to catastrophic proportions, it's no longer effective to work at this within national borders only, because plastic pollution is a transnational global crisis that really requires global cooperation and partnership. So the ways that our members work together to tackle plastic pollution is essentially by addressing the plastic crisis across the entire value chain. So this is why I wanted to include this image here for us. So you can see that starting from the top left here of the graph, of the chart, plastic really begins to be pollution from the very moment that its raw materials, fossil fuels, essentially, oil and gas, are extracted, and plastic causes pollution at every single stage of its life cycle. So while many of us started to become alarmed at the plastic pollution crisis from the point of dumping and burning at the end here, it's important to recognize that the plastic pollution crisis really begins much earlier, much more upstream, as we say, before you find yourself picking up plastic waste in the street or in your rivers. So this is really what kind of drives the Break Free from Plastic movement, is going as far upstream as possible to really tackle plastic pollution at the source, and really focus on systemic change to reduce the production of plastic at the source and push for long-term solutions. So here are just a few grounding facts for us to remember that Break Free from Plastic members are working to address some of these key issues underpinning the plastic pollution crisis, some of the key drivers. So number one is really to recognize that plastic pollution is a production crisis. Production of plastics are expected to double within the next 20 years unless we take immediate action. As I said, it pollutes at every stage of its life cycle. It's one of the largest contributors to climate change, as greenhouse gas emissions are released during its different stages of production. If the plastic industry were a country, it would be the 5th largest contributor to climate change. And the consequences really disproportionately impact communities in the global south through a number of various factors, including the illegal waste trade as a big one. And it's important to recognize that the solutions we have been sold are not working. So we really cannot recycle our way out of this crisis. It's important to recognize that since the plastic industry really started its explosion in the 1950s, only 9% of all plastic produced has actually ever been recycled. So this is not a solution we can rely on alone. We really need to address the source of the crisis and stop producing so much. And this is where we use the brand audit initiative to address the companies who are driving this production in the first place, to really put the spotlight back to them to change the way they package and deliver their products to people. So at Break Free from Plastic, what we believe is that the best way to address the plastic pollution crisis is to turn off the tap for companies to stop producing so much plastic in the first place. Otherwise, if we just focus on cleaning up at the end of the life cycle, we'll be cleaning up for the rest of our lives and many more generations' lives to come, because it wouldn't really be addressing the root cause of the crisis. And that's why with this brand audit initiative, we're really mobilizing volunteers all over the world to collect data and hold companies accountable for their role in manufacturing this crisis in order to catalyze a systemic change. So by combining this people power and data evidence, brand audits are the Break Free from Plastic movement's tool, pressuring companies to reveal their total plastic footprint. So really be transparent in terms of how much plastic exactly they're producing every year, to reduce at the source the amount of plastic produced, and to redesign their packaging for refill and reuse, systemic changes that already exist and we know are effective and able to work in many different contexts. We want to push for this because we know that no matter how hard we can try as individuals to avoid buying plastic and really reduce as on an individual level, this will unfortunately never be quite enough because plastic pollution is a systemic crisis and it requires systemic solutions. And the rate at which companies continue to extract more fossil fuels to manufacture more plastic packaging significantly undermines the impact of even our best intentioned, hard-working individual efforts. So I love the image here on the left of this giant tap, right? Just spewing plastics everywhere. It was made by an artist named Ben Van Wong. And when we think of, closing the tap on plastics, it's really important to recognize that there are institutions who have their hand a lot closer to the tap than many of us do. And that's why we use these brand audits to really put the spotlight onto the companies who have the power within reach to close that tap, rather than focus on cleaning up this ongoing growing mountain of plastic waste. So that's kind of a little intro. And for those of you who are thinking, hang on, she keeps talking about brand audits. So what even is a brand audit? Essentially, it is a citizen science initiative that involves recording data on plastic waste at a cleanup initiative in order to find out how much of this waste was produced by which companies, so that we can acknowledge the companies that are responsible for trashing our communities, our homes, our rivers, our towns with this unmanageable plastic waste, and put the focus back to them to change the way they deliver their products to people and hold them accountable. It's essentially made up of 4 main parts. You gather the plastic waste, you sort it into categories, then you record the data, and then you submit the data for our global database. And as my colleague Marissa said, we're now entering our 5th year of doing this. And year after year after year, it has unstoppably every year been the Coca-Cola company as our #1 top polluter at the global level. In addition to Coca-Cola being top polluter every year since we started this initiative, it's also interesting to notice that in many of our Breakthrough from Plastic members' national brand audit reports, that Coca-Cola has also been a top polluter at the national level. In fact, it has been #1, as we know, in Uganda and also in Kenya. In Tanzania, it was in the top 10. So it's really something to bear in mind that this company that's based in the US, that has grown to tremendous proportions around the world, is impacting our entire planet with the tremendous amount of plastic that they produce every single year. And you might be wondering, okay, so you record the data, you make a report, then what happens? What impact does it actually have in the real world? We've been very fortunate to see a number of great success stories just in the last 4 years since this global brand audit initiative began. First and foremost, probably the most impressive, most recently in February of this year, our top polluting company, Coca-Cola, announced new sustainability commitments of 25% reusable packaging by 2030. This was a significant milestone, considering that just a few years prior, Coca-Cola was still kind of relying predominantly on recycling commitments and funding cleanup initiatives to make ocean plastic and kind of really focusing on end-of-life solutions. But even though we know that Coca-Cola can do more than 25% and we need these changes sooner than 2030, it's still a significant step in our campaign that means a lot to those of us in this movement who've been campaigning on this for many years. So we know Coca-Cola still has a long way to go, but this is a big step for this campaign. We've also seen the brand audits influence the dominant plastic narrative in the media. The brand audit initiative has been mentioned in 500 media articles in 30 different languages in the last 4 years, and hopefully many more in the years to come. And finally, we've seen members around the world use their brand audits to enact really impressive systemic change. Everything from passing bans on single-use plastics in the Philippines, creating plastic-free schools in the US and other countries, filing lawsuits. There have been several lawsuits filed against some of the top polluting companies, including Coca-Cola, using brand audit data as evidence. And of course, various other ways of advocating for policy change using the brand audit data. So that's a little bit from me, and I'm very honored to hand it over to Nyerere to tell you more about exactly what was found in the Uganda brand audits. And if you're thinking, oh, this is a cool thing, I want to bring brand audits to my country, to my community, please do check out our website by going to breakthroughfromplastic.org/brand audit toolkit. I'll drop the link in the chat, and join us. Join this global community standing up to say enough is enough on plastic pollution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sybil, for that great presentation. And I totally agree with you that enough is enough when it comes to plastic pollution. So I'd like to now hand over to Nyerere Shadrack, who is a Ugandan youth environmental activist, as well as the founder of the End Plastic Pollution movement. Nyerere has contributed to BBC's investigative report or documentary about Coca-Cola's failure to address the global plastic pollution problem, and is the main reason we are here today. He will be taking us through the Flowing with Plastics report Uganda, as well as the significant outputs from this report. So over to you, Nyerere. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much. I appreciate everyone for attending this webinar today. Marissa, can you do a thumbs up if you can hear me very well?
Yes, we can. Quite clear,
Okay.
Nereo.
All right. Thank you very much. I have how many minutes also? Maybe.
You've got about 15 minutes, so you're all good.
Okay, thank you very much. So first of all, I would love to appreciate everyone for attending this webinar today. My name is Nirere Sadrach. I'm a founder to End Plastic Pollution, and we are in Uganda, and we envision a future free from plastic. Myself, I am an environmentalist and an activist, and this is what I decided to do despite my learning background being in business, but it is helping me to inform the journey that we are doing this. I studied international business, learning how multinationals and corporations are working basically on export business, either at a bilateral or a multilateral level. So I decided to focus more on how corporations are operating mostly within our countries. I also studied international trade, basically focusing on export marketing, export business generation, trade finance, and trade development for countries. So with that, I got informed so much of how goods move and how countries trade with each other and how companies also expand into new markets and foreign markets and all that. I also studied sustainable business with the Saylor Foundation in Washington. And through this, I got informed so much of how and what businesses can do basically to address their environmental impact. So for me, starting End Plastic Pollution is partly stemming from this knowledge that I got through studying how businesses and how they behave and what strategies they should implement to address their environmental impact, and particularly plastic pollution. So the Uganda brand audits that we did start basically aiming at us creating an information pool that can be used or that can be tapped into to hold these corporations accountable with real data, because we didn't have this data in our country. So the process is helping us to capture the exact data that is undeniable for these companies to be held accountable. And it is hoping to inform policy changes at a national level and at a regional level to see that we push for more implementation of the. So End Plastic Pollution, we launched in 2020, and we started this, I did start this as a campaign, but later realized that it has to expand and grow, and we become many young people that are championing for this cause. And today we have grown into an active group of over 100 active volunteers and over 500 youth in schools, universities. We are having a membership of environmental activists and many volunteers that are demanding for greater corporate accountability and corporate action to end plastic pollution. So, and this is because corporations are endangering our future by contributing to more plastics and just continuing producing more plastics. So what we are doing is to see that we step up and be the generation of young people that are taking on the mantle to spread the awareness around the science of plastics, its effect to people, and helping people learn about plastic and climate change and what corporations can do about this, because at the end of the day, our voices matter as young people. The plastic pollution problem is now beyond the human action. We need to see that corporations that are at the beginning of this problem chain take greater action. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So our objectives are basically, like I have mentioned, we are more focused on pushing for a no plastic business operations. Previous slide, please, of the objectives. Hello, previous slide. No. Slide for objectives, please. Thank you very much. So like I was saying, we are basically our core objectives, we are looking at pushing for a no plastic business operations. Basically, these can help us to eliminate single-use plastics and have companies design with reductions and actual reductions in mind, and they can also redesign to eliminate single-use plastics by providing us options of refilling and options of reusing if we are to consume our favorite brands, but also the issue of revealing to us how much they are producing. This can help us to quantify their carbon emissions by understanding how much plastic they produce. This can also help us to understand how best we can adjust our measures to combat to the tune of damage that they are causing. Number two, we are looking at highlighting the cause of the climate crisis caused by the plastic life cycle, because like Sibyl was saying, the plastics as a material itself is contributing lots of greenhouse gases, and this can be equated to becoming the 5th largest emitter if it was a country, and that's behind China and the US. So if plastic is a country, we have it in the 5th place as a contributor to this to greenhouse gases. So we are trying to see that we raise attention to these issues and people can understand them and corporations can face the reality. We are also looking at promoting community action. We are also looking at influencing and informing policy at a national, regional, and a global level, and also raising awareness and also improving information sharing about plastics. Thank you very much. Next slide, please. As we wait for, okay, this is River Rwizi, and this is why we are here today, and this is why we decided to launch the Flowing with Plastics report. I do want to first of all appreciate the organizations, including Flip Floppy, the Infonile, people from Plastic Talks, that we did join together hands to kickstart the move that saw us reach this far, and that was the Save River Rwizi campaign activities that we did. Next slide, please. So when we saw this river in this state, we decided that we should expose this to the world and people can get to know what is happening to River Rwizi. First of all, River Rwizi is the most important water body in Western Uganda, and River Rwizi is a major water source that is serving agricultural purposes, that is serving purposes of human survival to enable people use the water for domestic purposes at home, like cooking food. So it is playing a very great role. It is also playing very great role in our tourism sector, and also it is playing very great role in seeing that many of our ecosystem is relying on the waters of River Rwizi because it is going through forests, it goes through national parks. So we have lots of other beneficiaries on this river. So, however, this river, by the end of this day, by the end of this report, you will have seen what it has become in reality. These, the images you're seeing, this is what it looks like today. It has become Uganda's most visibly damaged river with plastics. Next slide, please. Yes, next slide, please.
Sorry, Nirere, you are on mute.
Thank you. Like I said, we did start a report with findings that we did get from the data that we collected from River Rwizi. And prior to this, there was a slide that was showing partly some of the activities and objectives of why we did launch the Save River Rwizi campaign. And when we did launch the campaign, we held a cleanup, and this cleanup, we collected 537 items, and these items can be able to show you the information that we got and the breakdown of the data, as you can see in this slide, to show you how plastics is really, really a problem to our rivers. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So this brand audit was basically aiming at us exposing these plastic polluters and which companies are contributing to this problem. Because if we do not, previous slide, if we do not identify these corporate polluters, we cannot be able to approach them. So like you have seen on the slide that bared the graph. Yes, thank you very much. This graph, you can see that the Coca-Cola company is one of the leading plastic polluters and is the top plastic polluter in this country. 35% of the total collection of the materials that we collected belonged to the Coca-Cola company. And as you can see, multinationals in general, led by Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, BDCO is also now a multinational operating in several countries within Africa. Likewise, Harris International, they are all leading polluters in this country, and a mixture of also local companies. Next slide, please. So the Flowing with Plastics report is an exposure of how plastics is killing our rivers and how companies and corporations have ignored to take serious action to end plastic pollution. And we decided to focus this report on basically breaking for you how the Coca-Cola's World Without Waste initiative has failed us. This initiative was launched by the Coca-Cola company, particularly to see that it reduces its environmental impact, that it addresses with serious reduction targets, and also redesigning targets of their products, which has not happened, and this is where we are. So this report will help you to also understand what has failed within Coca-Cola's World Without Waste initiative. Next slide, please. So as you read this report, we call upon you to share this report, send a message to this report, share the message to this report with your leaders, within your networks, with everyone that you find, within the media that you can reach to, because we want to see that we have corporate polluters held accountable. We want to see that our governments are putting in place the legal instruments that can be able to hold corporate polluters accountable. We want to see that people that are bearing the mantle of recovering the waste, because like Coca-Cola has failed, like waste pickers are trying, let them be empowered, let them be empowered so that we can realize a world free from waste. Next slide, please. So through all this message, I want to call upon everyone to see that you can help us share our report, and you see that we champion for a world free from plastic. Thank you very much. I appreciate you for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nyerere, for all the hard work and the efforts that End Plastic Pollution has been putting in calling Coca-Cola out, and for setting the scene for our discussion in a short while with our expert reviewers. I do believe that this is only the beginning and there's much more work to be done. But with that, I would like for us to cross over to a short 3-minute comfort break, and we request for all of you to join us back here as we will be kicking off the second leg of the program with our expert panelists that will be providing us a review on the report. So if everyone could be back here at 2:39 CAT or 3:39 CET, that would be appreciated. Thank you. Sorry, EAT. Okay, so we're going for a short comfort break for 3 minutes and we shall be back.
Plastic pollution is struggling with single-use plastic, and that are never accounted for just because they're not by the coast, and people tend to, I don't know why, think that marine litter is born in the ocean out of the blue. And so I think one of the great things about the report is showing that basically plastic pollution actually comes from land, is generated on land, and it's the rivers that are carrying all that plastic to the ocean. And so it needs to be addressed as a global problem and not just from the marine litter perspective. So I think that's one of the highlights for me.
Thank you so much for that, Anna. Griffins, would you like to share with us your comments of the report?
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes, we can.
Yes, thank you. My takeaway, from this report is that I actually referring to the pictures that were taken by our colleague Nyerere, and in that river, it's just shocking in terms of where we are at the moment with plastic pollution. And what came to me from this report is that to address this issue of plastic pollution, we cannot have a solution without cutting the production of plastic. And the accountability that the producers are talking about must be to have their investment, profits, and others invested in redesigning and other measures or other alternatives that are not basically plastic. So this is the accountability that we want to get from those involved in producing plastic. And so the issue of cutting the production, closing the tap on plastic production is only going to be the solution to get back our rivers to where we want them to be, where we can swim, get clean water. I saw that this river is serving a lot of agricultural in terms of output from Uganda, who also feeds us here in Kenya, for example. So we are worried that this kind of source of very natural thing like water is going to be a big menace. So my takeaway is that we have to cut on plastic production to have this issue addressed. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Griffins. Dana, would you like to share with us your thoughts on the report?
Sure. And first of all, thank you so much to the organizers of this event for inviting me to join this panel. It's a privilege to have this platform and honor to share it with my fellow presenters and panelists. Well, this report, it's so important, it's so timely. It presents such a strong regional example for why Coca-Cola's World Without Waste initiative and the recycling or waste reduction efforts of other major brands are just not enough. Never before have we been so inundated with marketing strategies by major consumer brands that are trying to convince us that recycling is the solution to our plastic pollution crisis. But recycling alone will not solve this problem. And big companies like Coca-Cola, though hugely influential, they just simply don't have the power to create or transform waste management systems and recycling programs in all of the countries where they sell their products. And Uganda is a case in point. As reported in the Flowing with Plastics report, 35% of the waste items collected in the River Rwizi brand audit belonged to the Coca-Cola company. And Coca-Cola produces 200 million plastic bottles per year in Uganda. Yet Coca-Cola's most recent World Without Waste report makes no mention of Uganda and reports no statistics on bottle collection rates or refillable packaging in the country. And plastic pollution and the local organizers of brand audits carried out in Uganda have done a great service to the Break Free from Plastic movement by documenting and sharing their regional experiences with plastic waste. And the world really needs to see this. It needs to see this, and the marketing and sustainability executives at Coca-Cola need to see this to understand that their recycling strategies that they've been promising and deploying for years are simply not working.
Thank you so much for that, Dana. We really appreciate those insights, and thank you for joining us at such an early hour back where you are at. So with that in mind, I guess, can you maybe just share with us, while we have you here, Dana, what was one key takeaway message from the report, and why that message? What sort of resonated quite strongly from the report for you?
Sure. So the authors and the contributors of the Flowing with Plastics report are making a plea to the corporate polluters to stop producing so much single-use plastic so their rivers can be saved, and so that other rivers don't end up in the same way. And there are, of course, so many important recommendations in this report, but I feel as though this is the one takeaway message that I would like to highlight. And we, as other NGOs, people and organizations concerned about the plastic pollution crisis, we need to help amplify this message. We need to demand from companies, including Coca-Cola, that an alternative solution to recycling, we need to demand that there an alternative solution to recycling, and we need to join the Break Free from Movement's call for corporations to reduce, reveal, reduce, and redesign instead. And single-use plastics are not the only option. They are certainly not the only option for beverage companies. There's another packaging system that Coca-Cola and other beverage companies are already using in many countries, and it's more affordable for consumers as well. And these are refillable bottles. In 2020, Oceana published a study which found that only a 10% increase in refillables in place of single-use plastic bottles in all coastal countries would decrease plastic pollution into our oceans by 22%. If the analysis were to include landlocked countries like Uganda and the flow of plastic to all aquatic systems, the impact could be even higher. And the good news, of course, as was mentioned earlier, is that Coca-Cola announced a new global goal to reach 25% reusable packaging by 2030. And this includes both refillable bottles and reusable cups for their fountain business. We need to hold Coca-Cola accountable to this goal and push for more. Reusable packaging must be prioritized over packaging that is recyclable or that contains recycled content, because adding more recycled content to a bottle, it won't stop that bottle from reaching Uganda's rivers, but replacing that bottle with one that could be reused could.
Sure. Thanks for that, Dana. How about you, Anna and Griffins? Just one key takeaway message, if you could share that with us from the report. Would you like to go, Griffins?
Sorry, it takes me time to get my message out. Thank you so much for the question. Yes, I just wanted to also actually say that one takeaway message is that just to plea, I mean, this is a plea to the producers of these materials to really look at how they can use the three messages, recommendations that we have. We now have a big opportunity, and in terms of global community agreeing that plastic pollution is a big problem and there's solution. So the plea that we have, and many other brand audit reports that have been shared from the BFFP, has called on the producers to address this problem. So my takeaway message is that if the corporations can listen to this plea, we have opportunity to come with clean hands in terms of addressing this plastic pollution. And the part of redesign, which we have talked about, could be one of the recommendations that they would need to take very forward in order to be all of us. We are all impacted by this, by plastic pollution, even from where we all live, even those who are in these corporations. So the plea from the recommendations, which are very good, is that this is something that we need to take forward in the global community discussion that is beginning to address the issue of plastic pollution. Thank you.
Thanks, Griffins. How about you, Anna? Is there one thing that resonated with you from the report?
I think one of the things that we also need to remember is that normally the corporations, when they make their voluntary commitments, those voluntary commitments have double standards. And I think that's something that we see in the report as well. And so when they, for example, make commitments to increase the number of reusable packaging that they do, they frequently do not include African countries in that pledge. And that's not very clear. You need to search for that information to get it. 12 years ago in Tanzania, we would only have reusable bottles for Coca-Cola. 12 years later, they still have reusable bottles here, but it's now less reusable bottles than disposable single-use plastic bottles. So the innovations take longer to get here, and when they actually get here, they are not properly managed in a way that the country can actually manage it, and all the responsibility, all the costs, all the collection ends up being on civil society and the governments, and never on the companies. One of the things that we have learned in Tanzania is that when governments actually put some regulations in place, like we put on plastic carrier bags in Tanzania, those work. And so there is also a very important need for the governments to actually go there and restrict the production of certain items, because when they do, that really has an impact, but the companies don't do it by themselves. So we need to remember the double standards and find a way to address them, especially in countries which revenue, like Tanzania and Uganda, is lower than actually the revenue of Coca-Cola.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that, Anna. And I'd just like to remind our audience members to please enter their questions or any comments they may have for our panelists into either the chat or the Q&A function that you see at the bottom of your screens. So we've heard quite a bit about Coca-Cola, and we've heard about their double standards, and they've been called out by all our panelists. I'd like to just touch on Anna mentioning that I know in February 2022, the Coca-Cola company did announce a new voluntary goal of 25% reusable packaging by 2030. And I do believe that that is a direct action and power of that brand audits do actually hold. So just want to find out, and Anna, you've already touched on this, but maybe Anna and Griffins, how do you feel this announcement will actually impact the next steps, a movement like whether it's Break Free from Plastic, or whether it's End Plastic Pollution Uganda, or any other movements working towards breaking free from plastic? How will this announcement impact their next steps and that they can take together? Anna, would you like to take the question first?
Yes, I can go first. So I think that a commitment like that, if it was actually followed and it was actual a global commitment, it would actually lead the way. I think one of the things that we see is that smaller companies tend to follow the path that bigger companies put in place. So a company like Coca-Cola, if they were to actually implement that commitment, could that have an impact? Yes, it could. The issue is that the commitment is insufficient. The commitment is not kept to the same standard, for example, of the increment in plastic production that they are pretending and they are aiming to have. And so I think one of the issues with that in terms of the movement is that we need one to go and keep them accountable to their own commitment, but it should also always mention that that commitment is not sufficient, especially when we include a layer for social justice in that commitment, because as the report shows, and as I think experience shows as well, is waste pickers are actually responsible for most of the plastic recycling in the world, and they are underpaid for that work, where the corporations are using them as a social responsibility image without actually rewarding them properly for the work that they are doing. So you can't actually have vulnerable populations upholding the commitment for large corporations being underpaid to do that, and that being okay. I think we need to call that out as well. And so for me, I think the commitment is always like, we should always be celebrating commitments to reduce plastic pollution, but we should not necessarily consider that they are enough to address the situations that we have.
Thank you for that, Anna. Would you like to perhaps, Griffins, maybe comment on what Anna has said, or provide your own comments as well based on that, that commitment that has been made by Coke?
Yeah, thank you so much. So I just wanted to add that the voluntary commitment perhaps it's just to have a way that we can be able to follow up on the impact in terms of the reduction over time in terms of the volumes, because with the big brand leading the way, as you see, most of the brand reports have come up with the results of Coca-Cola being the leading producer of plastic. So with a big brand, and particularly in developing countries where we have the informal economy, will be a very big impact in terms of having a reduction.
Thank you, Griffins. I'm not sure if you have frozen or if you completed with your question. Dana, would you like to perhaps any closing comments on that announcement, on the commitment that Coke has made from your side?
Sure. Well, we feel that in realizing their goal on refillable packaging, the Coca-Cola company it's important that they focus both on expanding refillables in existing markets and introducing refillable systems in countries where they don't yet exist. And the Break Free from Plastic movement can work together to help make this happen, given our global and far-reaching network. We need to send a message that we don't want more reusable packaging. We don't just want more reusable packaging, more refillable bottles. We want more refillable bottles available everywhere. And as the authors of the Flowing with Plastics report point out, in Uganda, even when people want to avoid plastics, they're provided with no options. And this needs to change, and we believe people are ready for this change.
Thank you so much for that, Dana. And I see those questions coming in, so please keep them coming in as we go on to a few more questions for our panelists, and then we shall move into a Q&A session from our audience. Okay, so I guess the next question then I have, we know that from the report, Coke has come out as the #1 polluter in Uganda. I'm sure you have already touched on this, on some of your perceptions on Coca-Cola, but just I guess from an individual perspective in your specific countries, if you could comment on Coke's either actions or failures in your country itself. If you're comfortable in doing so, you can unmute and just let us know, what are your perceptions of Coke's actions or failures in your specific countries that you're from. Would you like to go first, Griffins?
Yes, thank you very much. Just commenting on that, what has happened and what's going on. A lot of activities are going on regarding promoting recycling of plastic. This has been a big investment, and as you know, there's this company called PET Recycling Company that Coca-Cola is part of. So they have had a number of activities within informal settlements to be able to collect plastic, and sometimes I've used the waste pickers to be able to work with them in putting up collection centers for plastic. So these are activities that have been ongoing, but from the civil society public interest organization, we know that from the evaluation, these had had very little impact in terms of the problem of plastic pollution, which has also been documented by us in brand audits and other organizations. So that's one effort that is ongoing by the company. The other, I've also had promoting through the foundation to fund some of the activities, for example, by community groups. Just last week, I saw that I've been able to fund some community organizations with, for example, plastic baler machines and all that, which is more or less a good effort to get the plastic problem that we already have in the environment away. And as you know from us, the BFFP and other organizations, is our rallying call for closing the tap, basically looking at the upstream solutions. So the downstream solutions, yes, to address the problem by investing in materials or equipment will at least address the plastic which is already in the environment, which is already a big problem going by what we see, because the take back and collection system is not matching the number of the quantity that is released into the environment from upstream. So despite all these efforts, and as you know that what came out, which we really called out, the American Chemistry Council way back when this exposed by the New York Times of the investment in doubling or using Kenya as a route and other African countries to continue to export plastic waste. We think that the promotion of recycling was to prepare ground for such a kind of back end or underhand kind of negotiations to continue to open our region for flooding of plastic pollution. So we hope that this is not the reason why this investment is promoting this issue of recycling. We know that we cannot recycle our way out of this problem. So the focus has to still continue even with these activities based on the recommendations, even from this report, to address this problem upstream. So we hope that that is the end result that we're going to have with Coca-Cola and their investment on this. But these are some of the activities that are happening and being funded by the company in Kenya. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Griffins. Dana, would you perhaps like to comment on that question? Would you like me to repeat it, or you all good?
That's to meet Dana. Sorry, it was Dana or Anna.
No, it's you, Dana.
Sorry, could you repeat the question? Was it?
Sure. So as I was saying that, we've heard about your individual perceptions on Coca-Cola, but more specifically looking at their actions or their failures in your specific country. Any comments around that?
Yes, well, our campaign looks at Coca-Cola's activities from a global perspective, but I guess I can give some personal reflections on my experience with the company and in the country where I currently live, which is Ireland. When I actually stepped into this role, focusing on our campaign on single-use plastics only recently at the beginning of this year, and since then, I seem to be looking at the world through a different lens, and I see plastic waste, single-use plastic bottles absolutely everywhere, on the side of the roads, in rivers and lakes, on trails and in national parks. And in Ireland, we have a fairly well-resourced and developed waste collection and recycling programs. So if we're seeing waste like this all over the place in a European country like this, it's really a sign that this recycling promises recycling strategies that are being prioritized by Coca-Cola and other companies are simply not working. So yeah, and again, it's so important that this report is amplified and highlighted, because it really shows the extreme end of that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for that, Dana. How about you, Anna? Any perspectives from your side on this in terms of Coke's actions or failures in your country?
So Coca-Cola, to be fair to them, they have been actually proactive on engaging in plastic reduction discussions. For example, the extended producer responsibility discussions that we had in Tanzania, Coca-Cola was the only producer who attended the discussions. Mm-hmm. Here, we actually have local producers leading in plastic pollution, and Coca-Cola has been trying to organize all producers together, which all increases their power with government and makes it harder for us to put the regulations in place. Sorry. I think one of the things that we need to also remember is that the way that their recycling goals are set is that they recycle plastic that is produced by anybody. So by themselves and by other producers as well. And that's how they basically keep themselves or at least report on their own goals. And one of the things that brings is that in a way, yes, people can collect any kind of plastic and then try to bring it back to Coca-Cola. But in another way, it makes it very easy for them to reach their goals, considering that any plastic that is in the environment, any plastic, all the PET that is in the environment can be brought without them actually needing to report on their own production and on their own plastic reaching the environment. And so that's also something that we need to think about. And recycling in countries like Uganda or Tanzania is a very small business, is not something that happens at a large scale. And even the small recycling that is happening, it's actually more expensive than the use of virgin plastics. So that's never going to solve this equation. The equation and what we need to have done is the reduction of plastic production.
100% agree with you, Anna. A reduction of plastic production is the way forward. Okay, so we are almost at the end of our panel discussion, but perhaps the report has focused on plastic waste specifically in rivers. So maybe very briefly, if you all three could share with us the current status of rivers and waste specifically, if you are aware of it in your country in terms of waste. What is that looking like? And maybe we could just merge it a little bit. And how do you think brand audits could potentially, be something that could actually solve this problem, or be something that could actually document the waste along rivers, similar to what End Plastic Pollution has done? Yeah, I'd leave it open to whoever would like to answer at this stage.
I go first. So in Tanzania, rivers are used as dump sites. They are the source of all the plastic waste that we actually find along the coast. And that's obviously a systemic problem. And as a systemic problem, it requires a systemic solution. That includes the reduction of plastic production, that also includes zero waste systems that can be used for waste management, and that can really change the game in terms of social inclusion and in terms of environmental outcomes as well. We have done several reports about rivers and several research, and I think waste and brand audits are extremely powerful also to show that the kinds of waste that we find on the river is the same kind of waste that we find along the coast and in the communities as well, who the main producers are. And in our case, about 75% of all the waste that we find is actually locally produced, which means that we actually hold in our hands 75% of the solution. And so basically being able to draw those kind of connections, I think, is one of the most important aspects of conducting brand audits and showing to people that the waste is not coming out of the blue. It's not just appearing where it is, but we have a systemic problem, and that systemic problem requires a systemic.
Thank you so much for that, Anna. I think that resonates quite clearly throughout our discussion today, is that the only way to to solve a systemic problem is with systemic solutions. Dana, Griffins, any insights from you guys on that question?
Maybe mine is just to highlight that with our rivers before the plastic bag ban in 2018-17 in Kenya was so much polluted with polythene, single-use polythene bags. And as you know, that we've been highlighted as with some significant success on the ban that was implemented on single-use polythene bags. This reduced the clogging and particular menace eyesight pollution within rivers significantly. However, just like what we have in the report that was produced by Uganda, we still have a big problem in PET, and this has been documented in many rivers, particularly River Njoro. I give credit to James Wakibia, who has been able to credit or rather, photo document the pollution, particularly from PET bottle. So the other challenge that we have with regard to pollution of our rivers is mainly also from effluents, chemicals that are released, especially from industries, and these are also a big problem. And recently there was a very big exposure in the media how pollution has affected shared Lake Victoria, particularly from effluents and other pollution in rivers that affect the freshwater lake. So these still remain the biggest challenges in terms of our rivers, and efforts have been done to try and clean the rivers through programs funded by other donors, and also with organizations like UNEP trying to make our rivers, reclaim our rivers. However, the issue of pollution still remain a big challenge, especially industries not complying with the standards and laws that are available in the land and illegally, discharging the effluents. Not, of course, overlooking the issue of PET and other type of plastic that is still affecting because of from the land sources into these river sources. So that's still being a big challenge in our country as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Griffins. Any comments, last comments from your side, Dana, on that question? Or anything to add? Mm-hmm.
Sure. Well, I can't say too much on this question. As I said, the focus of our corporate campaign is a global focus rather than a regional focus. But I can just say that how important these brand audits are, because it provides irrefutable evidence of which companies are contributing to the plastic pollution waste. So it's essential that the audits continue, and so that we can continue to call attention to these plastic polluting companies and hold them accountable.
Sure. Thank you so much for that, Dana. Okay, I guess that brings us to the end of our panel discussion. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank all our panelists for providing such great insights on the report. We will now go into a Q&A session, taking a few questions and comments from our audience. And also, if there's any final comments from you, our panelists, that will also be quite appreciated. But I'm now going to take some questions that our audience members have put into the chat. And if we're unable to get to any of our questions due to time constraints, I will definitely take note of these questions, forward it to our panelists, and then forward the answers onto you specifically who have asked these questions. Okay, so the first question, and I'd also like to invite Nyerere, if at any point you'd like to give any responses to some of these questions, you're welcome to do so. If we can just keep our responses quite short and brief, that would be also appreciated. Okay, so our first question is, if we have to say no to plastics, what are the options for Uganda? A little bit of a tricky one, but maybe you could also hone it down to your country, not specifically Uganda. Nyerere, you can also just give some insight here as well. Would anyone like to take that question?
First of all, there are very many options Uganda can explore. And we highlighted the issue of waste pickers, number one. If a company's strategy says we want to collect every bottle we sell out, and you've not done that, then empower a group that can do that. These are some of the options we are trying to push them to invest into. Refillables, they are available so that we can eliminate the so many single-use bottles within their product family chain. So there are options applicable to every country and to our countries too. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Nyerere. Anything from you, Dana, Anna, Griffins, on that question? Anything to add?
Sure, I'll add just a little bit here. I think that's an issue. I mean, that's an issue that that the companies and Coca-Cola needs to address to provide that alternative option. But there's certainly a role for the Break Free from Plastic movement to play. There's a role for organizations based in these countries to create the consumer demand that's needed to push the companies into prioritizing refillables. And I should add that World Refill Day is coming up soon on June 16th, and it would be a great day to align communications efforts too. Momentum is building for a reusable packaging revolution in the beverage industry because of this recent announcement from Coca-Cola, and Pepsi is likely to make an announcement, as I understand, on reusable packaging soon. So the Break Free from Plastic movement can really work together to seize this opportunity and send a message loud and clear again that refillable bottles, reusable packaging solutions, we want more of them, but we also want them we want them everywhere. And as I said, the consumers are ready for this. We need to raise awareness about these alternative options and demand that they become available everywhere.
Thank you so much for that, Dana. So I hope that also answers your question, Statson, who had asked, what is the alternative so that people and big companies will shift and reduce? I do believe that it ties in with our question on what are some of the options, but perhaps Anna Griffiths, would you like to also just add to this?
I just wanted to, Anna, I just wanted to echo Diana's comment regarding the alternatives in terms of focusing on the, refillables among others. There's a basis and there's a reason. As you know, the plastic that we only see as visible is also a health issue, is a health concern. Plastic are made of fossil fuel, additive chemicals. I chair the toxic plastic working group within IPEN, and I've
Sorry, I think we've lost Griffiths. Anna, would you like to take over, and maybe Griffiths, when he does come back, we'd give him a chance again? Okay.
Yes, I can do that. So I think one of the things that
apologies.
Sorry, Griffiths.
Sorry, apologies.
Are you back, Griffiths? You can continue.
Breaks down. Sorry, at the moment when I'm just giving the point. So I just wanted to emphasize, and maybe Anna was coming up to echo that we look at this as also another consequence in terms of the health impacts that we have from hazardous chemicals that are used as additives in plastics. So you see the impact that this has on communities, also a social justice issue. So until this is documented, actually studies have documented the impact that we have on population and the health of us. So there's just every justification to focus on the alternatives and go back to our roots where we had these refillable bottles way back, so that we reduce not only the pollution that we see, but also the invisible impact that we have on health and other populations. So there's every justification to address the issue of plastic pollution from that angle as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Griffiths. Anna, you're welcome to share your insights with us as well.
So I'm a designer by formation, and so it's impossible for me not to take the question to a different level, which is, what is the problem that this plastic packaging is actually trying to solve? Because what is sold to people is that the plastic packaging is there to make products that are not available to the poor, or not available to the rich, available to the rich, whatever it is. And the truth is that those are packagings that are there to make products available for the companies to make more money. And so if we want to solve, for example, access to clean water, you don't solve access to clean water by producing water bottles that people cannot afford to pay for. You solve that by actually redesigning systems in the country and ensuring that clean water can be available to everyone, because that's the right that everyone should have. There is no company producing water. They are producing bottles. They're not producing water. Nobody can produce water. So the water that they are actually packaging belongs to the people that cannot afford to actually consume their bottled water. And so I think we need to take this question to a different level. And I normally say, just ask your grandma. Like when you are asking what the solutions are, ask your grandma, because your grandma will know what the solutions are. Those are the solutions that used to be in place before companies needed to brand everything that they produce so that they increase their profits. African delivery systems have never been based on single use. Anyone who lives in an African country knows that we reuse everything here. People reuse every single bottle. If you go to an African village and you want to buy kerosene, you do that by using soda bottles that are no longer used for soda. And so we have solutions here. These solutions have been in place forever. So the question is, how do we actually go back, go away from this waste colonization that we are going through, and we actually go back to our original delivery systems, and we go back to using them. So that we solve actually two problems at once. One is the waste colonization, but it's also the capitalist imposition of consuming patterns that we cannot afford.
Thank you for that, Anna. Our next question is from Benson. Benson says, or asks rather, what or where is the source of River Rwizi, and does it traverse or travel across the country? And I guess the best person to answer this would be you, Nyerere. That's the question that I have from Benson. He would like to know what or where is the source of River Rwizi.
Thank you very much. And I think also the short video from Infona will show this more. River Rwizi originates from the hills of Buhweju in western Uganda, and then it flows through over 10 districts. So it casts through a population of over 10 million people within the western region, and it pours its waters in Lake Victoria, and it has also tributaries that leak into other small lakes within western Uganda. So, and it goes through national parks also, including the Lake Bwindi and the Bwindi Impenetrable Forest and other important places. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that, Nyerere. Okay, I will take one or two more questions. The next one is from Oja. Whatever measures we are doing, like collection of plastics or recycling and any other form of plastic reduction, is not enough. What should we do to stop the plastic production from the companies and before they end up into the communities? So direct actions that we can take on companies to stop plastic production. Who would like to take this question? Yes, Anna?
Can I start?
Yes, go ahead.
I think one of the things that we need to push for is policy and regulations. I know that feels disconnected from our realities. When you think about policy, we think about something complicated that we cannot influence that much. But I have specifically had conversations with the Coca-Cola manager here in Tanzania. And one of the things that they have told me is that if they were to replace their systems or their single-use packaging with reusable packaging, and they were the only ones to do that, that would put them at competitive disadvantage. So that's not something that they would do. But if there was a regulation in the country saying packaging is mandatory and they not use the single-use plastics, then that puts them at competitive advantage and they would happily do it and lead the way. That can only happen if the regulation is there for everyone. So that's why we cannot really rely or trust the voluntary commitments, because they will always come after profitability. And so we need to push for regulations, we need to push, and we actually have specifically for the East Africa, we have a single-use plastic-free East African community campaign that is going on. We have a petition going on, and we are trying to actually harmonize regulation across the East African bloc. And so having people actually pushing for that and pushing the governments for the regulations, to put the regulations in place, I think that's what's going to be the game changer in that.
Thank you so much for that, Anna. And I'd just like to invite Dana and Griffins, if you have anything new to add to what Anna has said, very briefly, you could let us know what that is.
Sure, I can start. I just like to, echo that what Anna said is so important, and I completely agree. And we could actually look to Chile for recent regulations that have been introduced on that mandate sales of refillable bottles, and legal provisions also introducing quotas for refillable bottles. There are other examples of the importance of government intervention in pushing this forward. But I also wanted to mention another thing. The report makes an important recommendation to phase out investments for single-use plastic production. And I think this is also really key. Money makes things happen, and we need to call on investors to seek investment opportunities with beverage companies and bottlers to fund the development and build out of refillable bottle systems also.
Thank you so much for that, Dana. If it's okay, Griffins, I will just skip you for this one simply because of time. And I'll just take one last question, and that is from Chris. Chris says, in your experiences, generally, it is the most impactful to publicly call out the brands in these audits. That is, SM campaigns or to go to them privately, perhaps with policymakers or perhaps with lawsuits where possible? And can you please dive into why and the context of that a bit deeper? I'm not sure if we've got that question. Does everyone understand that question? Okay, perhaps if one of you could take the question, that would be great. I don't think we will have enough time to go into all of them. Benson, I do see your hand raised. However, we don't have enough time to bring you on. But if you could please put your comments or any final questions you have into the chat, and we can address them offline, that will be appreciated. Thank you. Yeah, does anyone want to give a response to Chris's question? Or do you need some time to think about it and we could address it offline?
I can go.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Anna.
We have tried everything, all of those, with exception of lawsuits. We have tried everything in Tanzania. We have reached to producers privately and tried to have a conversation about it. And that conversation was fruitful to a certain level, but at the time that it was supposed to turn into real action, it didn't actually go in that direction. We do a lot of publicity around the brand audit. So we spread the word about how much the producers are responsible for the plastic pollution that we find. And that is something that ended up being used even by governments in official reports and in official discussions about extended producer responsibility and things like that. So I do think that naming the companies and making sure that people understand where the plastic is coming from is extremely important. And Tanzania is not exactly the best environment to do lawsuits. So that's not something that we have pursued. But to be honest, what I think we need is a combination of all of that. I think we should try basically everything that we can, because the size of the problem, I think, kind of outstands the size of our impact in addressing that problem. And so I think one of the things that we need to do is try to find people that can be strong at advocating with the companies. We need to find people that are strong at advocating with government. We need to have people that can make civil society understand the problem. And we need to do all of that together to try to have more of an impact and push for solutions.
Thank you so much for that, Anna. And as we come into the hour, or rather half an hour into, yeah, I think our panelists have done a great job in unpacking the report, and Nyamitonga has done a great job in launching the report. So I would just like to take this opportunity to thank you all sincerely for taking the time to give us that review of the report. And I think, yeah, we are at a close. So thank you to the members of our audience for being so great and sticking with us till the very end. We really appreciate your participation in this. And I'd just like to once again emphasize that the report is available and the link has been shared in the chat. The report is available for you to download and read it to your entirety. And I'd just like to thank also some of the sponsors that Nyamitonga has worked with, as well as our participants again online. We do hope that the amazing work that has been done by End Plastic Pollution Uganda and their team will inspire your actions in creating a plastic-free future for the generations to come. I think the actions that were mentioned resonate quite clearly from the report, and we do have a way forward. But with that said, it is the end of the webinar, but we do have a bonus video to share with you all if you are willing to stick around and watch that video. So this video is from InfoNile, and our colleague Anika will be brought on to share this video. So if you can stick around for 5 minutes more as a bonus, this is our offering to you. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you so much for your facilitation, and thank you so much to our panelists, and congrats again to Nyerere. As a closing bonus, welcome to the stage, the virtual stage, the InfoNile team. Let me know if you need support with screen sharing, but the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. And of course, as Anika, my colleague, does on the screen sharing, I would love, before we start the video, just give you a small insight of what we do as InfoNile. So InfoNile is a group of journalists that basically cover stories along the Nile Basin. And of course, these are 11 countries. And we do major stories around water, but of course, we do emphasize data journalism, and that's that we give these stories a face of data. And also we do train these journalists on how to use data in reporting their stories. Let's take it off for now, if at all we can be able to share the video, Anika. And so this is just a trailer. We are working on the full video. It will be out next by the close of this month. So we hope that you can look out for it on our social media platforms. Thank you so much. Anika, may you play it?
Today, we want to show the world that River Rwizi is being polluted by plastics, and companies that are polluting it are ignoring to take action to end plastic pollution. Plastic is a mess in our rivers.
Did we lose them?
Sorry, Anika, are you there?
Today, we want to show the world that River Rwizi is being polluted by plastics, and companies that are polluting it are ignoring to take action to end plastic pollution. Plastic is a mess in our rivers, and River Rwizi is the evidence that we have. Let us wake up and call upon greater action to end plastic pollution now.
A lot has been done in regard to saving River Rwizi, but of late we have got challenges of plastics, which is an emerging challenge that is really calling upon everyone to come and give a hand towards saving River Rwizi.
The issue of plastic bottles in River Rwizi has remained a challenge, though us as journalists we have continued to report about it, and some reports have come with a positive impact. We have had government organizations and non-government organizations coming in to act. We have had groups, pressure groups forming to put a campaign at least after 2 months to be cleaning the river. This has come as a result of our reporting, and we pray that the campaign continues. So far we have heard that there is also 2.8 billion that has been put aside to be collected in line with collecting plastic bottles in River Rwizi.
Thank you so much for screening that video for us, Anika from InfoNile. Is there any last words from your side, or can we close?
Sorry. So as InfoNile, we to have this video release to come next at the end of this month. And I would love to give it to my friend here, Anika, to just take you through some of the things that we do as InfoNile. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm not going to take you through much since I know we're at the end of the time, but just to encourage you to watch the documentary. This is just one of the many hundreds of stories we've been covering on plastic pollution, especially around Lake Victoria, working on magazines, training journalists to report on plastic, and basically we support them to visualize the kinds of brand audits that end plastic pollution and other groups are doing. So we work with journalists to visualize the data and to put it out there in their local media houses. So please check out the documentary and follow our work at InfoNile. We are a strong supporter of end plastic pollution, and we really appreciate the platform you have also given us. And great job, Sadrak, on launching the report. We can't wait to work with you to communicate it.
Thank you so much for that, Anika. We do have a request for the link to be shared to the full documentary. So perhaps you could send it over to Nyerere and I can get it to everyone that had joined us here today.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Thanks, everyone. And yeah, that's the end of the webinar. Thank you all for joining us and for staying on. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Take care.